Good afternoon, everyone who is sitting here and who is watching from home to this program, How to Report on Turkey, a collaboration between the Bali, Turkey Now, and of course the Black Sea Project. The Turkish government cracks down aggressively on the press, and the Black Sea Project believes there's an immense need for independent, investigative journalism on Turkey. They want to solve this need. But how can we create high-impact reporting on Turkey? That's what we're going to discuss tonight. I'm Zara Toxis, and I will guide you through this evening. I'm program maker at the Bali, and as far as I know, there are also journalists here right now, so maybe in the end of the program, or maybe earlier, we will open up the discussion. But first, why is there an immense need on investigative journalism on Turkey? I want to give the word to Zeynep Şentek. She's a Turkish academic, an award-winning journalist working for the Black Sea on investigations, human rights, corruption, and the environment. A warm welcome. Please enlighten us.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks everybody for being here. And I know you're all waiting for Orhan Pamuk, but you will hear about Turkish journalism before too. Thanks so much. So Turkey's press is dead, yes. And Turkey is an authoritarian state. Erdogan pulls all the strings. So most people won't argue with these statements, maybe a few Turks. But the truth, like with all countries, is more nuanced and more complicated. One thing that rarely enters the conversation is that how it really feels to live in Turkey. And I would like to give you one small example. My best friend lives in Istanbul. She works in the finance sector. We talk on the phone. And one day we were talking and I started just ranting about how the economy was ruined, how deep the crisis was. And then she paused and then said, well, it's okay actually, it's not that bad. And then she tried to change the subject several times. Her tone was quite unusual. And then it was then that I realized something, that she was scared. So I realized that living under authoritarianism isn't about laws, about propaganda, media, or even the presidents. It's about fear and ordinary people. How mechanisms, structures, and systems are remade to instill fear and collective anxiety into a population. Then one result is that a normal girl no longer feels comfortable ranting on the phone with her best friend. This is the reality. So it's hardly a surprise that our media is partisan. President Erdogan's cronies control the majority of the big businesses in Turkey, therefore the majority of the media houses. This means you see, now it's almost like a joke, you see the same headlines in the newspapers every day, like, great news for pensioners, you know, our country is on the rise, Turkey is a phoenix, we will win everything. And then tiny price adjustments for electricity. And that last one is real, and that tiny price adjustment is something like 150% price hike in a month. We do have some small media houses who are anti-government, but they too often fall into the trap of conflating partisanship with journalism, and sometimes they write things that they cannot back up. There are no clarifications in Turkey, there are no corrections, life just moves on. For the last few years, I've been teaching young journalists in Turkey, so they're in their early 20s and recent graduates. They work as junior reporters in newsrooms, and they always ask, how do I do investigative journalism? They want to write about the real conditions of the country, but their editors discourage them. Not just because it's risky, but it's also hard. These young journalists don't have any role models in journalism. They aren't excited about the work at all. And they think these cool, you know, spotlight kind of newsrooms exist in a different planet and that it would never work in Turkey. They don't even know where to start or the nitty-gritty of investigative reporting. There is a main culprit, and his name is Erdogan, yes. But he's not the only one. He didn't bring Turkey and Turkish press to where it is today just by himself. Turkish journalists and correspondents in the foreign media hailed Erdogan for years as a model for Islamic democracy in the Middle East, even as he was changing Turkey's constitution, taking over state institutions, jailing academics, journalists, and military personnel. Blaming Erdogan is easy. It doesn't always help. Like I said at the beginning, Turkey, like every country, is complex, and it is important to embrace the nuances of a country and to be fair to its citizens, those who suffer the day-to-day realities in big ways or small. And what role does journalism play? Well, in all the ways bad journalism hurts the country, good journalism helps it. And at the core of the best journalism is righting of wrongs, exposing injustice, corruption, and lies. This is the creed of quality investigative reporting. Every country needs it, not just Turkey. Turkey is no exception. Yes, we know Erdogan regime is violent, it's corrupt, it's brutal, and it is all true. We talked about how bad things are for so long. We want to move forward now. A country needs healthy democratic institutions, and these institutions are run by people with job titles like judges, prosecutors, lawmakers, activists, unionists, writers, novelists, editors, and journalists. We chose journalists, and we believe we're no more or less important to society than a teacher or a nurse or a garbage collector. I believe that journalists should talk less about how sacred the profession is and do more of it. To sanctify the investigative journalist is to make the profession inaccessible, when what matters most is the work. So I would like to tell you a little bit about our work. Okay.
Is it working? Otherwise, Berend can
Yes,
do the
please.
next slide.
Yes, please. One more, please. Thank you. The Black Sea, our project. The Black Sea started as a travel blog. Two friends, journalists, went around the Black Sea and chronicled life as they saw it. It was a project by the Romanian Center for Investigative Journalism, and then it evolved into an independent investigative news organization for Eastern Europe. The Black Sea's journalists have been at the forefront of cross-border journalism in Europe for a decade, from the very first projects like Offshore Leaks to more recent ones like Football Leaks or Malta Files. We covered Ukraine, Russia, Romania, Moldova, and other countries around the Black Sea region. But among our most notable achievements have been our Turkey reporting. Next one, please. Exposing corruption at the highest echelons of Turkish politics, writing about human rights, workers' rights, and environmental abuses. Next one, please. Many of these stories were nominated for and won awards, made headlines, created political scandals, especially in Turkey. We were cited in US state intelligence reports and in Turkish parliamentary inquiries. Once even a Turkish parliamentarian passed around physical printout of one of our stories in the parliament until one of Erdogan's MPs just grabbed it and ripped it into shreds in front of cameras. We also collaborated on major projects with flagship media around Europe, such as Der Spiegel, Mediapart, L'Espresso, NRC, and many others. As much as we helped other journalists, they helped us. For example, in the Netherlands, we revealed the hidden $140 million worth of assets and debt of Turkey's then prime minister. It was in property and cargo ships, hidden offshore, mostly here in the Netherlands. We did this by joining forces with NRC journalists. The wealth was hiding totally in plain sight. The partnership brought it out. So basically, after that story, we realized that behind, every grumpy, stumpy, mustached, corrupt Turkish politician was like a tall, handsome, blonde Dutch lawyer helping him set up these schemes. And it might surprise you to learn, but we did all this work without really a proper infrastructure, regular salaries or support, and under difficult political circumstances. The Black Sea has been in hiatus for the last year, while we tried to figure out who we were. And we found out by looking back at the kind of stories that I just mentioned. So 2 days ago, it's very exciting for us. 2 days ago, we launched Stichting the Black Sea here in the Netherlands. And its headquarters are a 10-minute walk away from here, and 3 minutes by bicycle if you prefer that. And we're here because the Netherlands has always been good to us. Our work got a lot of praise here. We know a lot of journalists here, and some of our previous work was funded here. So we set up our new foundation here. So we want to come today to tell you how we're envisioning something new for Turkish journalism and what we want to do. And we want to hear more from you too. So, as I said at the beginning, Turkish press is not free. And there is little investigative journalism. But our goal with the Black Sea is not just to put a band-aid on a broken journalistic system. We want to demonstrate that exciting, narrative-led investigative journalism has a place and an audience among Turkish society and abroad, even in countries like the Netherlands. Now, here's the difficulty. Organizations that are interested in funding Turkish journalism are often too scared of the consequences they might face inside the country. And for those donors who are immune to this risk, it is because Turkey is not on their radar at all. And this is a problem to solve if we believe in true democracy, not as an abstract term or a buzzword. And this is the point I want to leave you with. For many, even those of you here, democracy is possibly about transparency, constitution, laws, even Erdogan. For others, those who live in these places, it is all these things, but it is also about making a living, protesting your government. And sometimes it's about ranting on the phone with your best friend without fear. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. And of course, congratulations with the new Stichting.
Stichting, yes.
I wonder, do you live yourself in Turkey?
I don't, yes, I don't live myself in Turkey. Like many journalists, I also left, not because of any prosecution, but it's kind of like a generational thing that you seek better life outside Turkey because of what's happening. However, we do report on Turkey. I spent long time in Turkey doing reporting, and that's, in fact, we realize that it works to our benefit to be a bit outside of Turkey, but still have deep connections to the country. This is also another reason why we set the foundation up in the Netherlands.
But you go back and forth.
Oh yeah,
and that's possible.
Yes, of course it's possible. Yes, it's totally possible. We are very interested in keeping a low profile and really just doing the work. And so we don't, in Turkey, it's very easy to get into trouble, unfortunately. So we know the rules of the game really well after working on the country for so long. So we know the balance, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. But the work itself, the investigations, that's never jeopardized.
And you said a lot. You also blamed foreign media, and you talked a bit on Turkish journalists, and of course on this new project. But if you compare the Black Sea Turkey with other investigative journalists, with other projects, how are you different? What are you doing differently, or what will you do differently?
You mean in Turkey or the foreign media? Or
No, you as the Black Sea, how will you act, or what makes your work different than the other journalists who are reporting on Turkey?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, foreign media has correspondence, and they mostly do good work. And I was talking about more of an historical context, which everybody was kind of. It's possible to blame a lot of different types of groups and people there. So that's the past. You do have great foreign correspondents, but they report. What we want to do that's different and that doesn't exist yet in Turkey is to set up a small investigative newsroom. And just to do, we're not interested in, publishing stories and, I don't know, columns, like these things are banned. No columns, no opinion pieces, nothing like that. We really just want to do investigative reporting. Okay, is it going to take 2 months to finish one project? Then be it, because we place a different type of importance into like really doing the work and really doing narrative-led and investigative reporting, or diving like really deep into sort of like a certain topic. So that's why we're different. So far we did it, and we haven't done it in a while, and we really want to revive our project so we can do it, because there is a momentum now in Turkey, and it's perfect to start doing it.
Is that also what you hope for this afternoon? That comes out like a new momentum for you?
Yes, we're here to tell you about it. We're here to meet with others, and we really want to hear. I mean, Netherlands is, like I said, it's really nice that we did it here today. So we want to get inspired, talk with other journalists, talk with the participants here, and we want to kind of hear what you think, and if you think it's a good idea. Yes, this is what we want from tonight, yeah.
That's what we're going to see, if the audience agrees. I want to invite Sebnem Arsu, please join. Also a journalist who has been covering Turkey and its region for over 20 years.
Yes, tells about my age, so...
We're not going to mention your age, don't worry. Your career in print journalism started in 2001 at the New York Times, where you became the first Turkish correspondent.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good thing to write on your CV. Do you agree with Zeynep's speech?
Well, yes. I have to say that.
It's okay.
Yes, thank you. I'm a little bit more optimistic, and since I live in Turkey and do report in Turkey and engage with local journalists, I can see that there is, as Zeynep said, there is that energy. But the problem is, unfortunately, since 2008, when this one huge media group was taken over by a pro-government company, corporation, we started seeing the erosion of trust in media in Turkish public. So it was once that group, and then in 2018, I suppose, Doğan Group, which is the main ship of media in Turkey, was again handed over to a pro-government company, corporation. So there is the erosion of that trust in media, in the public eye, of course reflects on you. Because what is the point of journalism? Journalism is to report on stories for public good. So if the public does not see any good in what you're doing, then you can't justify yourself. You can't justify the need that there needs to be journalists in Turkey.
So how did it affect your work then?
You feel it in the street when, in the past as a journalist, when I did street interviews or when I went to an organization, there was kind of that respect and acceptance in people. But now they say, oh, which media are you? Then they expect you to be one of those, media groups that acts as the mouthpiece of the government. So it needs extra work to explain that what you're doing is for public good. And it's also important to establish that because there are dozens of journalists in jail right now. We don't even hear about, in Europe you hear about Osman Kavala, a respectable person, I know him myself, but it's not only Osman Kavala, it's not only Selahattin Demirtas, it's not only, high-profile journalists that face these problems. There are dozens of journalists in Anatolia that we don't even hear about. They don't get reported in mainstream media or even in fringe media or, opposition media because people either see it as a common practice or they think that they might have done something wrong. So I think also in terms of investigative pieces, why do you do investigative pieces? Because it's for public good. We have to explain more in a louder pitch that this is for people and people should own journalism, should own journalists. And I think that's how we can make a difference.
Do you write everything you want?
I think I am blessed in that respect because I have not worked for Turkish media. I've worked for foreign media my entire career. So it has been actually easier, or I wouldn't say that I felt protected, but I felt more liberated in terms of reporting because that publication represents something. New York Times represents something, Spiegel represents something, Independent or Reuters or AP. So it is harder for the government to trace. It used to be harder for them to...
It's your protection, actually.
Yes, exactly. But recently, I think we've lost that too, because Bloomberg journalists had been on trial. A close friend of mine from Wall Street Journal had to leave the country because of her reporting in the predominantly Kurdish region. So it is actually reaching out to the people working for foreign media too. Recently, actually, if you guys have a chance, Reuters published an amazing, compact summary of what was going on in the media landscape in Turkey right now. And all the stuff that we're talking about, they put it into context, and it's a very nice piece. And it was the head of the communications directorate himself coming out and calling it propaganda piece. So will Reuters be given access to some exclusive government functions in near future? I don't know. That's how it works. It's harder and harder to get access to the government side. And for journalists like us who believe in Anglo-Saxon type of journalism, meaning unbiased, straight reporting, you need the government voice. You need to also reflect what they think about an issue. I think that's a challenge that many young journalists have. They don't even, especially the very young ones, 20 plus, they don't have even the notion that they should call the Interior Ministry and ask for a comment. And
yeah,
I was working as an editor for The Independent, and I was keeping an eye on this new venture that Independent took. It was Independent in Turkish. And I was flagging stories that I said, you're saying all these things, but you're not talking to the government. And then the reporter, well, why should I? Because they never respond. Well, that's important to put in the story too. So the access to these government voices has declined dramatically, even for me. I am basically cashing my credit over 20 years talking to government officials and then trying to see what they think about the claims that we write about, we report about, and we talk. I mean, recently I had this interview with a senior presidential office official, actually, and I said, "Oh, this is great, you know, amazing," and I'll put everything in background. I won't give you a name because that has become a standard practice too. It's an interesting dynamic, and we're talking about how difficult it is for journalists to write something, but it's also hard for government officials to say something. I mean, don't take it as an entity. I mean, Justice and Development Party is in turmoil in itself. There are many people who are members of the government, and they're not happy with what's going on, but they do not have the courage to speak up about it because it's a one-man show. Their political career is in between the lips of a single person. So even the closest people would hesitate to criticize what's going on. So I'm just typing out my notes, and I received a phone call from his assistant, and she said, like, Şebnem Hanım, maybe you shouldn't use any of it at all. What do you mean I'm not using the name? I'm not, you know, saying it's, you know, hair color, nothing. And she said, no, nothing. So...
But if you're talking about the journalists who are behind bars right now, just for our idea, how do they know what they can and cannot write? I mean, of course, you can think about some general topics, but okay, maybe just don't do this. But is it like random, or is there maybe more specific something to say about this? Like how to know?
That's actually a very interesting question. I mean, when I started journalism in late 90s, we pretty much knew. I mean, as Zeynep said, this is not new. You know, problems that we had in Turkey with press freedom, or, you know, freedom of expression, or, you know, journalists ending up in, you know, in court or in jail. But we knew, like, if you said something about Kurdish issue, or if you said something about, you know, Armenian genocide, or if you said anything about, you know, anything around those lines, would, you know, land you in trouble. But these days, it's like once you're in their radar, you might be, you know, facing any kind of investigation. And also, in the past, maybe you would be called to the court to testify, but you would not be arrested. Here, the problem is arrests have become a method of intimidation. I mean, at least 5 friends of mine that I would sit around this round table are in jail for nothing. They don't know. Sometimes the indictments even are not there. They take you in jail, which is totally against any understanding principle of law. And then they will try to create an indictment since you're in jail to present in court. This is unacceptable. But the problem is, unfortunately, there we're talking about the erosion of trust and confidence in justice system too. Like, what do they stand for? Why these journalists are in jail? I followed the Cumhuriyet newspaper trial. Every hearing I was there, and I just couldn't believe it. Unless you're there, you don't believe it because it's surreal. Like, there's no reason why these people would be kept in jail. But that has become a way of intimidation. And unfortunately, there is nothing to do about it. I mean, when you look at the court cases, why is Kavala in jail? Or there's 16 journalists in jail right now in Diyarbakir. There was a, you know, dawn raid. When was it? I think it was a couple of... Oh, sorry. Sorry, excuse me. There was a raid one morning, and then 16 journalists were taken in. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the way they were questioned, the only evidence of criminal activity that the prosecutor presents is their work of journalism. Their articles, the language they're using. These guys have never held a gun in their entire lives, but they're accused of terrorism. So this is something that we did not necessarily experience in the past, but what we see at present.
You started with, I'm a bit more optimistic.
Yeah.
Now you ended very differently.
No, I mean optimism because, we're talking about 80 plus million people. Yes. And when you look at popularity of Erdogan or, even forget about popularity of Erdogan, but when you look at the political landscape, Justice and Development Party government does not represent Turkey's entirety.
We actually had two graphics, one about distrust, where we just talked about. Maybe we can show that one. And the other one maybe after this one. In the meantime, I want to ask you a question because you sketched a bit how international media wrote or write about Erdogan. In the beginning, they hailed him. And if we're talking about journalists who are in jail right now, can international media mean something for them?
I mean, I think I don't know. I don't want to sound cynical. However, I think what Şebnem was saying, that it became common news for Turks that journalists are in Turkey, I think it's the same for foreign media as well. It's not really reported in the foreign press either, right? And in Turkey, you have people kind of forgotten in jail, right? I mean, even we colleagues, we're kind of like, okay, that person is in jail too. Or you have sorts of like segments of society after the coup that was like kind of jailed, and we just like, we don't know what's even happening to them because politically they were on the wrong side. We don't like them, so we're kind of like, okay, whatever, we have to like stop caring about these people. But that's also fear, like I was saying. You're not like, you pick your kind of battles as Turks. Yes, foreign media could help to publicize it, but I do understand the perspective is like, for how long? Like for so long, okay, this many journalists are in jail. In Turkey, if you have one tweet, you can go to jail. And then it's kind of, I think, so what now? I think it's like we don't cover it, nobody covers it. It kind of became like an everyday occurrence. I don't know if you would agree, Şebnem, what the media would do.
I told you, because there was this one period that I decided to do freelance work. And that coincided with a similar incident. There was this arrest of a couple of journalists. And I realized there's no interest at the foreign desk, at any publication. And unfortunately, it becomes a matter of figures. Like, if there are only 3, that's not a story. But if it's more than a dozen, yeah, it's worth it to mention, kind of thing. But I see it as a part of a bigger package. I think it has to do with the brand value of Turkey. There was this time when Turkey was, the sexy topic in
early
2007, 8, 9.
Possible membership of the European Union.
Yeah, exactly. So we're facing towards Europe. The economy is doing well. The rhetoric is, in respect to universal values of human rights, everything is perfect. So that places the country somewhere. But then, as for today, the economy is declining, the rhetoric has changed, and, the justice system is full of big question marks. So it all helps assists the deterioration of the country image itself.
The Turkey is not attractive anymore.
It's not attractive. I mean, even for tourism, people complain about Europeans not coming to Turkey as many as people desired them to. But it all creates this one image. Would you like to spend your valuable time in a country where your security is at risk? You can be prosecuted, or, know that people are persecuted, know that this and that, for that reason, a person is mistreated. So it's all this one image. That's why you can't get your story into the paper because Turkey is not valued as it's valued before, and it has many components to it.
But who is going to read your stories then?
But you know, okay, I'll make a point. And when Turkey was cool, early 2000s, Istanbul was hip or whatever, everybody talked about it. But then period came after the Gezi protest 2013. Then the foreign media was also obsessed because we saw before, but like after 2013, more 2015 and 16, they saw that Erdogan was becoming authoritarian. So that became a sexy topic.
You mean the foreign media?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And then it was like, it was insane. I'm sure you experienced it. I was a freelancer, so there was a lot of, you know, if there's Erdogan on the headline, they would take it. Mm-hmm. If it's about something about Erdogan, opinion pieces, there were so many publications asking me for opinion pieces. I'm like, who cares about an opinion piece? But because it was read, because people were very interested, the media was very interested, and they just like kind of pumped this, you know, Erdogan, the Sultan of Turkey, and it was horrible then because, like I said, there are many more nuances, and then you're catching up, and then they saw this authoritarianism as this, I don't know, this oriental, different, sexy thing that they want to write about. Not about the reality or the whatever. It was just like the Sultan. Mm. I'm like, you know, the images that this invokes, think about the Sultan.
And what do you mean with the reality? If can you give an example of what stories should they have written then instead of Erdogan the Sultan?
They did write about it as it was happening, but maybe I didn't articulate well. I'm saying, I'm not sure, they did cover it. I'm not sure how much they were really invested in actually covering it beyond those kind of catchy headlines or grabbing people's attentions to read these type of stories. And so then that became less sexy. And then now, I'm actually very pleasantly surprised that there are so many people here listening to us today, because Turkish journalism stopped becoming a sexy topic like a long time ago.
I think there, you know, talking about the purpose of journalism and all that, you know, public interest is the key in our work. But also, I think it is our duty, and I believe that Black Sea can make a difference in that. Mm-hmm. We have to make Turkey relevant in the eyes of the European people. I feel like Turkey has been left alone for a very, very long time now. There needs to be interest from the European readership so that there would be pressure on my editor to report more on Turkey. But European people seem to have already put Turkey in their bad books, and, you know, it's been probably treating as a lost case because there is this identification of the country with Erdogan's government. I think European readership or all the institutions need to see that Turkey is much bigger than that, and it represents something much bigger than that, and it's essential for the cultural, social, and political harmony of Europe. I think that's what is being missed. I mean, this cliche that I hated writing, Turkey bridging East and West, but it is a beautiful cliche when you think about it. I mean, all this populism, all this polarization in Europe and beyond that we witness, and as, you know, social democrat people complain about, comes from the breakage of this bridge. So I think Turkey has a lot still to contribute. There's a very vibrant young generation in Turkey. Yes, they do desire to go to Europe, but there are also people who say, this is my home, and I will never be treated as an, you know, native resident of any country that I go to. So I have to straighten out my home affairs before I can, do something with my life. So, but they have to be supported. They have to know that their grievances are felt outside Turkey. And I think investigative reporting projects like Black Sea, funding young journalists, can give out that signal that they're not alone. And it is hard to do that because, I'm also in the selection committee of the European Press Prize, and I see people pitching in their stories. But the way of journalism is so different, and it's unfortunate the quality is not there. Why? Because
it's an award for journalists, right? Yearly award.
Yes, European Press Prize organization. So why? Because in the past, where do you learn journalism? You go to school, you study journalism, you get the theories right, and then you go out in the newsroom to practice all that. And there's your editor to correct your mistakes, to guide you in the right angle. But because of this huge handover of mainstream media in Turkey, since 2008, we lost that collective memory, collective experience in many newsrooms. Now the editor is basically expecting a phone call from Ankara as to what to put in the headlines or not. Imagine the finance minister resigns over Instagram. And then we're like, whoa, in the middle of the night. But you need confirmation in order to report it, right? In proper journalistic rules. It has to be recognized by Ankara. There is or at least Anatolian agency where we refer as the official source. Silence, dead silence for over 24 hours. And then we hear, and Reuters actually put it in the story too, then we hear that the newsrooms were actually received an advisory that they should not report the resignation until the resignation is accepted by the president. So if you're a young journalist working in a newsroom, what do you make out of this? So they lost that training facilities at a proper newsroom. So when I look at the nominations or, the entries, I'm like, oh my God, it's such a good story. Only if this guy worked with a proper editor. I think that is also one thing that organizations like Black Sea can fill, a gap that can be filled so that they can learn, the young journalists can learn how to do proper journalism, the training that they miss in a newsroom.
That's why I was talking about training young journalists, and I also mentored a bunch of them. And the thing is, like you were saying, Şebnem, it's always, okay, let's dig deeper. That's investigative journalism, right? And we would work on projects. Let's dig deeper. And then they will be like, no, the story is ready. I'm like, this is not a story. We have to dig deeper. And it was like, why? We can't find anything. I'm like, you don't know until you look. So that was, for me, the saddest part, because the new generation, although they want to do it, but they don't somehow learn, somehow learned it in a way that, okay, you go until certain time, certain point, because there is no time, there is no resources, and there is no editor that tells you, keep going, and then it's okay, you just publish. It might not be 100% accurate, but whatever, it will be forgotten in 2 days. And then the flip side of it is that those who dug deeper and then actually discovered that they can find information, and then you call 10 people and one person will say something to you that will lead to something else, that excitement was amazing. And then it's like to capture that, and that excitement and that kind of little spark of ambition in the new generation, and create a small newsroom that would do this kind of stories and dig deeper without worrying at all about, okay, do we have something for every hour on the website? Mm-hmm. Without caring about that, without having like weird editors waiting for orders from Ankara. It's just like, okay, it's just me, you, few other people, and we do what we want to do, and then we want to dig deeper into what we want to dig deeper, and then make sure that we find things and then get excited about the work, because otherwise it's too stressful and they're not happy, like the young kids. They're not happy, they're not excited. That's why I was saying they're not excited, because it's for them, they type and then their editors bother them all the time. It's like, where is the copy?
I'm going to stop you. We're going to talk about the landscape of Turkish press more in the next panel. I've just one question for you before you leave the table. The Turkish elections are upcoming, March 2023. What do you think? Will it be like a momentum for journalism or a new spiral of violence?
Amazing momentum. And that's why we're very excited about the project, about launching, trying to find donors.
That's what you hope for, or you think that's going to happen?
I think I'm more optimistic than you now. I think it's a great momentum. A lot of things are up in the air, and the support for Erdogan's party is in like visible decline. And then, if we can really like capture the moment, I think something potentially good might come out of the elections. And I stay very hopeful about it. And therefore, this is the time to start doing investigative reporting, at least try to build something. Because, this is Turkey. Things will not be like this forever. I mean, I have to keep thinking that. Otherwise, it's too depressing. But the government will change. He will go one way or the other. By ballot, 100%, but he will eventually go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for now.
Thank you so much.
And of course you can join again. Thank you. I want to ask Marloes de Koning and Greg Shaw to join. Welcome. Marloes de Koning, happy that you were here. You are a former Turkey correspondent for NRC Handelsblad. You just told me until 2017.
The beginning of 2007.
Beginning. And now you're working at the foreign desk at NRC, but you're also going to maybe...
I was foreign editor.
You're foreign editor,
until 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
So now I'm moving to the investigative desk.
So you can tell us everything.
I'll try.
Okay. Welcome. And also to you, Greg, a British journalist. Your work appeared in leading international media outlets, and it included European investigative collaborations such as the Football League's Malta files. Zeynep told us about it. And you're also an investigation editor at the Black Sea. Welcome. Mm-hmm. I want to start with Marloes. We just had a graphic about how people or how parties are, I think, affiliated to media. Maybe, Berend, you can show, or how, which party, how people feel favorable to which newspaper, and it's connected with the party they vote for. If you look back at your time in Turkey, is this something where you could say, like, yes, like people are so, parties are so close connected to media, just to understand also for us how media is divided there, if you compare it with the Netherlands?
So. Yeah, the media landscape, people know when you read a certain newspaper or you watch a certain newspaper, they can make a pretty good guess what you would vote for. So that's very telling. Also, the journalists that are in jail are often from a certain political color or media outlets that are associated with political parties, mostly the Kurdish political party.
And if you listen to Zeynep's story and also the talk we had about Turkish press landscape, how do you look back at your time? Was it a hard time to make stories? Was it easy?
In a way, it was easy because people in the Netherlands or in Europe are interested in Turkey still, I think. Although I agree with you, I do agree with you that maybe a lot of people have given up hope because many things changed for the worse, and there's some sort of repetition. It's getting even worse. More journalists in jail. More. people are longing for change, but I do think they're truly interested. And
But was it also easy to make a story there? You had no problems?
actually, yes. Also, back then, it was really hard to get people from the government side to actually give you access or to give you quotes, but not impossible.
Were there things you did not write? Could not write?
Not really, although after 2015 I became aware that, you know, I wouldn't spend the rest of my life in Turkey for sure. So I knew I would leave one day, and that did make a difference. No, but it did make a difference.
In what sense?
Caring less if they would throw me out, simply because the way foreign journalists, but also other journalists, are pressured is through the accreditation process, and your press accreditation is also your residence permit, your ikamet, and that's the thing they play with. You know, they prolong the procedures, they deny press accreditation, or there are lawsuits.
It's a game between the foreign journalist and the government.
A game with only one power, to blackmail the others. So.
And how
So I was aware of that, and I was aware that I would leave one day, and that gives you a sense of freedom, also a sense of detachment. I mean, I was sad about that, because when I just arrived, I felt this love for the country that I still feel. I would, you know, gladly stay in a way, but so.
And how did this affect your stories? Like, can you give an example? Like, were you more aware before, and then you thought, well, now I'm writing about this?
No, not really.
Okay.
But I do remember at a certain time thinking about Erdogan's finances, for example. That will probably be the last story before leaving, if I ever. Yes, you know, like start working on that file, and then if you ever publish this, then probably it's goodbye. I left before ever really digging into that, and I think nobody has until now, maybe apart from the Malta files that were mentioned already with Yildirim and his son, and, you know, the Dutch connection. But apart from that, you know, when it comes to the family finances, I've seen very little. Yeah.
Greg, what interests you about Turkish issues?
I think that what's interesting to me is that in most of the rest of the world, there's a kind of strand of conspiracy theory that exists. In Turkey, it's often kind of true. You know, the term deep
Can you talk a bit?
I'm sorry.
So they're very modern. They're everywhere now, the conspiracy theories.
The term deep state is a Turkish term. It was invented in Turkey. Some of it is happenstance. My career has not all been Turkey. It's just the one thing that, I mean, when I started, we would publish some stories now and again, and then there were collaborations, and there's never really been anybody. It was very difficult to find people suitable that could engage in collaborations. One of the first things I ever worked on.
You mean foreign media?
No, in Turkey.
Okay.
So one of the first big projects I ever worked on was offshore leaks, and this was in 2013, I think it published. I don't think there was a comparable cross-border type investigation that had happened before then. And then there was all this data left over from Turkey. And I would ask people that I knew, like, who could look at this? Because it requires English language skills, it requires some level of computational skills, and a sort of, you know, who could you trust to take this and do a proper job? And there wasn't really anybody. And so slowly, as I was involved in more cross-border stuff, there was always that gap. And then we just tried to find a way to fill it. And then it ended up being much of what I did over the last few years. So, like everybody else who is not Turkish, you kind of fall into Turkey in a way.
So what's the situation now? I mean, because you've been trying to train, educate people? Is that what you're saying? Or?
No, I'm saying that's how it started. That was kind of the issue. I mean, over the last, I don't know, 10 years, maybe less, you know, there's been a lot of people that we would go to, invite onto projects. Almost all of them failed, apart from Sebnem.
And just a bit more specifically, why did they fail? Is it what they mentioned in the talk before? Like, there's no, like, the lack maybe of education, there's no, the system isn't just working good for journalists. What is it?
I think it's a mixture of things. There's not a culture of it.
There's not a culture of good journalism.
Well, it's not. It's very easy to get away with bad journalism. This is true everywhere. You can kind of. There are personal reasons, and there are, on a personal level, there are people that want to do investigations. You can tell within 5 minutes whether they can do it, because it's extremely boring to sit and look at documents all the time. So that's one problem. The other problem is kind of an idea about, again, what it is. I don't think there's too much to compare it to. You have to have whatever you love to do. You have to have some sort of. You have to look up to people, and I think the field is pretty sparse in that area in Turkey, at least in the last decade or so.
So you need more people like Sebnem, but then they don't write for Turkish media.
Actually, we have had good journalists and good journalism in Turkey, despite all odds. I mean, Turkey is a country like, produced people like Orhan Pamuk and, other journalists in the past, done things that made a difference. But whatever they found out made an impact. Right now, there are investigative pieces being published. Cumhuriyet does it, or other websites do it. The problem is you investigate, you come to a conclusion, you highlight something, and there is no accountability. That's the problem. That's the thing that discourages young journalists spending hours and hours staring in a computer. They have to believe that they're making a difference. But when you look at who pays the price in the end of those wonderful pieces, or pieces that could have been much better, it is the writer itself. I have friends who go and report in a courtroom to a prosecutor because of an investigative piece that they've done, whereas the person who is subject in the story should be in that room answering questions. Sedat Peker. We have this character who is an organized, illegal, organized crime boss. He admits, he says, I'm filth. That's why I'm exposing filth. He's been, writing these threads on Twitter it's been on YouTube. Millions of viewers that no publication in Turkey, even in the world or in Europe, can imagine. The person, according to a colleague who's done this, piece on the exposés that Peker has done, there's more than 360 allegations, alleged crimes being exposed to this person by this person saying, I've been there, I'm a criminal, I was an accomplice with this person. None of these claims have actually been picked up by the prosecution in Turkey. So what do you do? So there is this void.
Have they been picked up by journalists? I mean, are they trying to verify?
The journalists are trying to verify. There was an effort. But the problem is you need sources to do that. But there's also that and a big cloud of intimidation.
Because I hear you actually more blaming the system, but you're also talking about the qualities of individual journalists.
I think that's also true. I've noticed that over the last few years that even the people that you consider to be on the left are kind of anti-free speech too. But in Turkey, it's something that's extremely frustrating. People, I wouldn't say left, but certainly liberals are very anti-leaks because they associate leaking with Gülenists. And so you're starting from a very difficult position in the first place. And there's a sort of a conspiracy-mindedness to things. And so you publish a story, people find out a little piece of information and go crazy with it, and suddenly you are the devil.
But can you elaborate a bit on that against free speech? Can you give an example? Like, what do you mean?
I mean, spend 5 minutes looking at a number of popular Turkish journalists that you would not consider to be conservative. That
And maybe
it sounds really loud to me. So
No, it's not.
okay. You can spend a few minutes looking at the Turkish liberals to see that examples. There are plenty of examples. Actually, I don't want to make examples because I don't want to name people, but there are lots of examples of the people who should be on the side of.
Well, if you don't want to, it's okay.
I would feel a little bit uncomfortable. So,
you mean people on the left are also, they don't want everything to be out in the open because it also can hurt their interests?
Free speech is okay as long as it's your side.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
In Turkey, this is so normal that we don't take a step back and listen how messed up it actually is.
There was an example of a woman. I think a woman wrote a short story, and it was from the point of view of. You have to correct me now. Point of view of a man who was sexually harassing women, and it was published, and people went insane, and they attacked the publication that did it, and they threw the writer, who was a woman, under the bus. And it wasn't conservatives; it was liberals that did that. And I watched it happen. So if you can't have a fundamental understanding of that, if you don't like something, you don't attack people's publications or. When we published our stories, we watched CNN Turk and had very well-known Turkish journalist. I can't remember his name now.
Ismail Saymaz?
Ismail Saymaz said that we should be investigated by the prosecutor in Ankara because of the stories that we published in Malta files. And I texted him, "What the fuck are you saying? Like, how many journalists do you want to see in jail?" And he blocked me. So that's an example of somebody is supposed to be on your side or claims to be on your side, but they're not. They care more about fame and getting on TV.
I think this idea of democracy has to be reestablished too. I think it is. I see it when journalists in Kurdish South get arrested or detained. The journalists in the West are indifferent to it before the public. Like, I see that there is very limited support from mainstream journalists cannot because they fear that they will lose their jobs. But even freelancers, even in my circle, there is this notion, what if they are linked to the PKK? What if No. They are journalists. They are being brought to jail because of the work they do. And that work is the same as we do. So that people in this whole cloud of intimidation try to protect themselves and try to be the judge of their own. Whereas the universal standards should be the judge in itself. So I agree, sometimes the liberals and social democrats can be as brutal as the pro-government voices. And unfortunately, there is not the infrastructure, the establishment to set things right, because they're biased too. But when you look at, you see that in judiciary, somebody has to say, this is wrong. But no, and people's, as you put up previously, the people's trust in the justice system has faded. So in that void, people try to impose their own understanding of freedom of expression or, democracy into their lives, and it's messy. It gets messy.
Marloes, do you recognize this?
Yes, completely. Unfortunately. Yeah.
And also, when you're working as a foreign editor, how did you choose the stories? Like, how did this process go? Like, you talk with the correspondent, or do you maybe work also with Turkish journalists, or no?
The correspondent works with Turkish journalists sometimes, and as was pointed out, we do collaborations, like on the football leagues or the Malta files. We were also involved. We are a member of multiple journalistic corporations like ICIJ, but also the European
Investigative collaboration.
Thank you. So we're open to that. And as for selecting stories, I'm a person who's interested in the world around me, so I would like to understand that world. And I'm really happy with stories that tell me things that I didn't know yet, actually. Unfortunately, there are often, you know, a lot of stories that actually sort of confirm what you already thought was out there. But I don't think there are any real limits as to what we print or not print. I mean, there are limits to what journalists can actually do, or what they do, or the ideas that they have. You know, there's not everybody is as creative or investigative, or. But I think the limits are more there than in what we would print. I mean, there are quality standards, of course. I mean, you need to, when you collaborate on a journalistic topic, you need to be able to verify what you're writing. So it's those are long processes, very intense, but we do them.
I had some questions also about the audience, like the Turkish audience, but I also want to look at our audience just to get an idea if there are any questions at this moment, if you want to participate. Otherwise, we move on a bit. But I see you have to talk into the mic, so Berend will come to you with our lange afstands microphone. Good thing from Corona. Yes, please.
I'm also a former correspondent in Turkey. Hi, Şentek. I have two questions, and it is how are you financing your investigative journalism? That would be very nice to understand. And I think that we have come to one layer deeper. I mean, I think it's very nice to talk about all the obstacles for journalism in Turkey, but I think it is very, very important that you also mentioned that the concept of democracy in Turkey is also one of the aspects. If journalists themselves don't have this concept of freedom of speech and all the other things, and that's what I remember from my time. Over the years, there's always been topics you couldn't discuss, not only the Kurdish issue, but for me, it is very fundamentally for the future of Turkey, if there is an in-depth idea also from journalists about what democracy means, because it could be that Erdogan is going one day, but what is replacing him then? That is, where is Turkey, the democratic Turkey 2.0?
It's a whole new program.
That is, I think it has to come partly also from journalists. Where do Turkey head to? I mean, to blame Erdogan is the most easiest thing to do. But if we have to go layer deeper and deeper, otherwise we can be tomorrow here again, have the same discussion. We can have next year be here. We have the same discussions. We are doing this for decades. So where is this new concept of democracy in Turkey? And in that concept, there is the rule of law, and that is leading. But it's also, you are not damned because I don't agree with you. And that is very much also what is so-called independent media are not independent themselves too.
Thank you. Maybe you can first react on the financial, and then we can react on the second statement. Wait, you have to talk in the mic also.
Thanks. So we were financed before by philanthropy. So we raised funds in that way for the media programs of philanthropic organizations. One of them, which was in the Netherlands, in fact. So foundations, basically, who fund independent journalism. And last year, we did not have no funding in this year, so we are actively now raising funds to kickstart our operations, and then so increase the funds every year, and eventually we have a plan, kind of like a business plan almost, to have also reader contributions, and then kind of move towards a sustainable publication in the near future. But immediately what we need is funds to like really just trigger everything and get us going, and that's what we're doing now actively. Thank you.
Does one of you want to react on?
Actually, I cannot agree with you more, because it is truly not the issue of Erdogan leading the country, all these violations. We have to remember that Turkey has been a growing democracy when Erdogan came to power. And it was the Turkey's aspiration to become more democratic that made Erdogan so popular internationally and domestically. There were a lot of liberals, a lot of social democrats who voted for him, hoping he would bring Turkey to a more democratic future. But what happened? There was a train wreck on way to that purpose. So it's not that Turkey has, well-versed about the true democratic life. It has, internalized all the principle of democracy that now suddenly we're, having difficulties. It's a process. It was an ongoing process. So there's a lot to learn. And I do believe good journalism can make it happen. Mm-hmm. But for that, the young journalists, as well as, veteran journalists, they need trainings. And Craig is right. I mean, it is hard to find qualified journalists to do collective pieces or corporations with Western publications, because there are language barriers. Many people do not know about data journalism. It's not in schools. It's not part of the training. They don't familiarize themselves with how to dig for information online. There's no culture of that. So it has to start from A. And I happen to be part of the International Press Institute in Turkey too, IPI. So, for example, this new season, they're planning to start trainings for journalism students, just to, just bring them up to the standards of Western journalism. Sometimes, when I look at the nominees at European Press Prize, I get blown away with the quality of journalism, where journalism is heading, all that, multimedia works, all these, websites and so on. And I'm like, oh my God, we're so behind, where to start? And I feel horrible, terrible, because it's the future of my people, is the future of my country. So before we talk about investigative journalism, we have to talk about how to train people to collaborate with a different level of journalism in Europe. And I think, Black Sea can do a lot, as I said, and this has to do with learning the trade while working at it. So there's a lot to learn, and the more collaborations there are, and then you have a new breed of journalists in Turkey.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
Because you said Turkey was on track to become more democratic, and then there was a train wreck.
Yeah.
I suppose you mean the war in Syria, or what's the train wreck?
Erdogan,
because I do think geopolitics matter in this.
Of course. I mean, this is not only Turkey. I mean, when you look, there's this Orban, there's Putin, there's other leaders that do not fit the profile of European leadership that I was brought up with. So there is, of course, this disease of popularism throughout the globe, and that was part of the train wreck. Being democratic was not any longer a vote winner, so people wanted to become more nationalistic, and they discovered this and that. I mean, Turkey has its own reasons why there has been a train wreck. Was Syria one of it? I wouldn't necessarily say so, because it was one of the events that showed Turkey was changing course, definitely. But I think that erosion of democracy, the principles of free speech and all that started before that. But of course, I mean, these developments never help, never help. Since the conflict, it just, for example, added more on what you cannot report. I mean, mind you, there was this one period when I would be taking flights to Hatay, this southern border town, and there were clear, I've never been to Libya, I never reported in Libya, but clearly Libyans on the plane going to the border, complete in black, fighters. I could say it, I'm not a military person, but I have the experience to spot a military fighter. And there was, when you reported on foreign fighters going through Turkey into Syria to fight, that was a big issue. They didn't want this to be talked about, or the support that, you know, Turkish government might be extended to certain, might be extending to certain fighting groups in Syria. That was another hush-hush. So it added to it, definitely.
You want to add something?
I kind of want to say that, you know, the issues around talking about the quality of Turkish journalism is it's not out of like smugness. It's kind of out of disappointment that it isn't better than it is. It's not a superiority complex. It's wanting it to do better. And I do think and I think the point is correct that you cannot build a newsroom around fighting Erdogan. One day the guy will be gone. They did this in the US with Trump, became hugely popular to report on Trump, and then he's out of office, and suddenly all of the ratings are dropping and they're struggling. They still have the same problems they had before. So I don't think you should be designing newsrooms around one particular person. I guess the other point was, I also think that as a person who spent many years working on Turkey and investigations and all the things that came with that, I forgot my point. That it's also a little bit sad to think about how you have to look at foreign media as the lifeline for this, because I don't think it's true. I think it's also a little bit unfair to ask each country to prioritize Turkish news. They're not going to do it. I'm British, and Brits are obsessed with themselves. You can see that in the news at the moment. And so Turkey has to build it for itself. The journalists have to understand the people who share principles. Sebnem and I do completely different work, but we share a principle of the kind of work that should be done. And I think that's what's more important. And when I talk about, well, the Black Sea's role, it is because it's very, very minimal. And if you don't speak Turkish, even those small pieces of investigative work that might get done, people outside of Turkey are not going to read them because they can't read them. And so I guess it is sort of trying to act some way in as a bridge and to hope that we can find the better people to work with and be a conduit, which we have been for a while, for people within Europe who are looking for good Turkish journalists as well. This is what's happened over the last few years. But I do think that it should fall on the shoulders of good Turkish journalists to build this thing. And this is why everybody who's involved in the Black Sea, barring me, is Turkish and a woman. So it's trying to put ideas into practice. So,
thank you. Yes, if there are any questions. Yes, short.
For the lady in the back, you said, you know, or your colleague said, there's no encouragement for investigative journalism because nothing comes out of it. They're not prosecuted. But did anything come out of it on the Dutch side? Because the Dutch side is also involved. You said, the blonde, blue-eyed lawyer is facilitating the stashing away of cash. Was my first question. And my second question is, Turkey has had a long history of military coups, and the military was very dominant at the time that I lived there. And I saw the changeover to Erdogan, which was hopeful. So maybe there was a little window of opportunity in the 1990s. But before that, there was also maybe not a real press freedom. I mean, there were other restrictions. So it's like the one system toppled the other system. And it's basically still two systems fighting one another from basically the inception of the Turkish state. So there is also maybe a systemic problem.
Zeynep?
I'll take the first one, but maybe for second one, Şebnem, you might be a better person to answer. The first one, the Dutch side, actually, I mean, but in the Netherlands, of course, you all would know, there is a system that enables this type of stashing away wealth. And then people use this system. Lawyers, accountants, etc., enable these corrupt politicians to set up these systems. So it's not illegal, but it is corruption, right? So here on this side, actually, nothing happened either. It should have been on the other side, on the Turkish side, to see how can a prime minister's family amass this kind of wealth in like 10 years in office. So, but that kind of revealed two things for me, at least working on multi-files. One is that because these things are so international, because these people stash away their wealth offshore, then going to the other side and finding information, such as in the Netherlands, is an amazing opportunity for a journalist. Then you reveal something that you can't find in Turkey. And second of all, that it made me realize that, you know, you have these systems. Malta is one of them, the Netherlands, and these are like cool offshores, you know, not like British Virgin Islands that are infamous, but these are like the nicer offshores. Then it made me realize that, you know, you have these systems that enable this type of corruption. And it kind of, we wanted to reveal this type of pattern of systematic problem when it comes to financial flow of wealth, basically. So no, nothing happened on this side either.
And for Şebnem, the systemic question?
I totally hear you. I hear you. And it is true that, you know, press freedom has never been, you know, at its ideal in Turkey. During the military coup, and after that in 90s, as I said earlier, you knew if you wrote about the military, you would end up in trouble if you wrote about this and that. And then, as you said, there was a window of opportunity that was missed. And then with Erdogan, it's the same thing. I actually liken it to, you know, Lord of the Rings story. Whoever puts that ring is just changes face kind of thing. And Erdogan had, just like the military at times, had too much power. And, you know, I feel it when I walk into the Turkish parliament often. The power of holding the state, it's so toxic that it basically melts into the system and the party that owns it. So we're talking about Erdogan and his, you know, greed for power, or his this desire to be in reign for longer. But it is actually the people around him, the circles, that are equally addicted to that power. So the problem is everyone is behaving as if they're the kings and queens of the system. So, and because Erdogan is micromanaging everything, if you're not in his radar, you get away with it. Sometimes you see that with the prosecution. Sometimes a prosecutor can be too ambitious and may think that prosecuting that journalist may actually catch some attention in Erdogan's court so that he could become this and that. So there's that weird dynamics inside the state, inside the government, that in the past might have existed, but this is how I feel now. It is very much that toxicated area of power that people exercise in their own terms, because there is no, as I said, established institutions to say you're doing wrong. You know, there are price to pay if you did this.
Is there anyone else with a question? I had one last question about the audience, maybe for you, Greg. How we just saw the figures about distrust of Turkish people in Turkish media. How to reach the Turkish audience to read good investigative journalism? What What would be your thoughts on this?
I actually think this is a wider problem. I mean, it's a specific question on Turkey, but I think journalism in general can be slow to change to things. I think it is a responsibility of a journalist or a news outlet to find engaging ways to tell stories. Financial stories suffer this quite a lot because they're so boring. Like, it's not nice to write one. It can't be nice to read one either. And so it's important to find ways to tell stories that people will engage with. Because you've seen over the last 15 years or so, things shift, and the power that newspapers have can be moved to a different form because they're not engaging with their readers. So how do you do that? I mean, you start by finding good stories and telling them well, and writing about things that people care about. I mean, you can write another story tomorrow about Erdogan. Nobody's going to pay attention because there's a thousand others. So you have to find those things that are unique. And I think even for journalists, it's the same. What I was told very early on was find things that you care about to write. I think that's a little bit more important than chasing what's in the news, which will go in a few weeks, and then you're kind of stuck waiting for the zeitgeist to tell you what you should be writing about. So I think some originality wouldn't hurt.
I'm curious, is there like one topic that you're hoping to start digging into with the Black Sea project?
We thought, we're discussing a podcast with Zeynep to look at historically, like the unwanteds of Turkey.
The what?
The unwanteds of Turkey, the people who have historically been thrown out, and look at the historical stuff. There are other projects. Generally speaking, I can't talk about the specifics. We have a...
Maybe the mic.
As the last point, our future story. But we want to really, because we have now a lot of accumulated experience in looking at offshores and, following the money. So personally, me and I know Craig as well, we really want to look at these connections because, like I said, Netherlands, Malta, Virgin Islands, whatever information we can find and connect it to Turkish businesses and, big corporations, etc., and try to see how these connections work. And, ultimately they're done to hide either assets or tax or whatever. So, for example, that's like follow the money type of very traditional type of stories done in more engaging ways and written in more interesting ways is one thing that we want to do.
And actually, in addition to what Zeynep says, I think those international links and internationally available information, the stuff that you can't reach in Turkey but in Netherlands or any European country, is quite valuable if you're doing an investigation. I was talking to this academic who has done research on corruption in Turkey over decades. And he told me that the difference that we were dealing with right now was that the government has prepared the legislations so that what we would traditionally call corruption would not look corrupted on paper. And that, he said, was the genius side of the corruption approach, or the approach of government. So it is hard when you look at what's been done in Turkey, it may not say as much as what you would see in international accounts or records.
It could be a great data project.
Yes.
Because upcoming.
With the timing of the law change, you can see corruption
the problem, the danger there is that there is, for example, this quite concerted pro-government media campaign to spread the disinformation that the opposition in Turkey is led by the West, is fed by the West. And in a country which is predominantly nationalist, like Turkey, this Western influence, unfortunately, plays in the hands of the government. That's what has happened in the past, over the years, in all elections. So if there is that corruption story being funded by the Western media, this can easily be drummed into the West is trying to oust President Erdogan, and that has been the talk for months now. Having said that, doesn't mean that these projects shouldn't be funded. No, but there is also that that thing that needs to be kept in mind. That's why, for example, when I talk to US officials or European officials trying to make their mind on whether to sanction Turkey because of this and that, that's one of the common concerns. If we sanctioned, would it be like the brave, courageous Turkish leadership, you know, bracing against the Western pressure? You know, there's always that balance to be, you know, to be thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hear the sound check of the band, which was my cue to stop. So no worries. We can
I
always.
thought it was just
No,
me, so I'm happy everybody else did it as well.
We can talk after the event and stay here a bit more. I want to thank you all, and I want to advise the audience to check out the website of the Black Sea, and also if you want to get in touch with them, with the journalists, maybe. Yes, we have a slide with the email addresses, maybe just to talk, maybe for a possible cooperation, maybe just to get some information. So, yes, you can email Zeynep, Aylin, or Craig. And this was the first program of Turkey Now in the Bali. At 7:30, we have a conversation with Orhan Pamuk. It's sold out, but you can watch via the live stream. And at 9:30, the concert of Ruken starts in our foyer. We hope to see you then. I want to thank you all for being here, and also the audience at home. Thank you very much, and hope to see you next time.